Good morning, Galaxians, and welcome to another live edition of the Galaxy CDs Rocks and Flips Reseller Talk podcast. We are back over in the Batcave for some listing and some reselling conversation. As I noted, there has been a lot going on in the world of reselling. We've covered over the last couple of weeks in the normal podcast. So if you have any comments, thoughts, opinions, or questions about all the chaos going on in the world of reselling, leave them in the chat and I'd be happy to discuss them because it has been a wild, wild time. The last couple of weeks, these platforms are far too busy making changes for this time of year, in my opinion. A couple of good mornings. Mel Flips It. Hello, welcome. Thanks for coming out. Sissy Moore, hello. Good to see you. Fern Flips, good morning. KG's Unique, Rare, and Antique. Good morning. I love, hate eBay. Yeah, that's definitely where I'm at with it. I say it all the time. It allows me to do this and make a living and not have to have like a traditional job. But man, sometimes they make it so hard and so aggravating for no reason. Just changes for the sake of change. It's just really weird. Big Dre, good morning. Thanks for coming out. Paper Gold, let's get after it. Good to see you. Thanks for showing up. So again, if you have anything that you would like to say, feel free to chime in. Otherwise, I'm going to just get in here and do some listings. I have got, if you've been following, I just did a big buyout at an estate. It was late last week. It ended up being about 1,800 items. So I have got tubs and tubs and boxes full of stuff to go through. Most of it so far has been pretty decent. It was one of those deals. I went in and I just kind of did a survey of the lay of the land and saw what was there and made them an offer of 50 cents a book. I would take all the good and the bad. We weren't gonna cherry pick it, was just gonna take it all, and they agreed to that. So I spent the better part of 3 or 4 days making 3 or 4 trips to Dayton to get all that stuff, and now the fun begins. Getting to go through it. It was interesting because as I was getting up there to get the second load, there were people coming. They had run an auction for a lot of the stuff that was in there, and they opened up another door and there was a whole nother room full of books that they had put on the auctions, shelf after shelf after shelf of cookbooks and whatnot. I ultimately did not take any of that. There was probably another 1,000 or 1,500 books there, but I was pretty well maxed out at that point. So I did cherry pick about 70 items out of that on the last trip up there. But yeah, I could have really hit the jackpot. But I think a lot of that stuff was probably lower value, so I skipped it. Let's get back into the chat here. Big Dre says, I spilled my coffee in the car this morning before I could even take a sip, so not off to a good start. Yeah, I feel that. No good. Tom D, good morning. Thanks for stopping by. Miss Lachey, good morning. Always good to see you. KG's Unique, Rare, and Antique Books. I do like one change eBay made in your orders. eBay lets you see your transaction history with the buyer. Yes, there have been a bunch of changes. Some of them have appeared to be mostly cosmetic. Some of them, like we've talked about over the last few weeks, have added like additional clicks into some of the stuff. But there have been a few useful things in there. The sales page, if you will, the orders page on the web does have a little bit more information in it now. So again, it's kind of a mixed bag. You got to take the good with the bad. I don't understand why we're doing all of those updates and changes now. As someone talked about in one of my other videos, there's so much potential downstream impact with software when you make a change that if you're not really diligent, you cause unintended consequences. And I think eBay's running into some of that. But it is what it is. We'll muddle through and continue to sell. Let me know how your sales are going. Mine have continued to be pretty solid. No complaints. Mercari is still super, super soft. eBay's been pretty good. Etsy has been very solid. So overall, sales have been pretty good. Mickey in Orlando, good morning. Thank you for coming out. Paper Gold, how much of the marketplace do you think eBay is losing to whatnot? That's a good question. You might be better poised to answer that than I am. I would think it's a not insignificant piece. But if you look at their quarterly results, they're hanging around. What was it? The last quarter was a 2%, I think, year over year increase. So they're not getting their nose too bloodied, but there's clearly a lot of merchandise that could be going to eBay, could be going to Amazon, could be going to Mercari, that is going to Whatnot shows. I mean, Whatnot's not doing billions of dollars worth of sales this year without that merchandise coming from somewhere else. So my guess would be there's a not insignificant piece there. I think it's one of the reasons that eBay is so focused on trying to figure out their live show and live selling piece so that they can try to recapture some of that. I'm not convinced when you're late to the party on some of that stuff. There's a first mover advantage, and Whatnot has clearly established itself now as the place to go for that sort of thing. So I think eBay probably has a pretty uphill climb there. You can let me know what you think of that. Black Cat Flips, good morning. Thank you for coming by. Den Decor, good morning. eBay has been so bad. Etsy is ripping. Mercari is Depop, surprising. I've seen some stuff on some sellers really having some problems with Depop not being able, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, to get assistance when they're having problems. So be aware of that. But yeah, Depop has been good. I looked into it and I just decided against it because of the label situation. I want to do my own labels and be able to, accurately pass that savings along to the customer. And Depop really just wasn't set up for that. So Paper Gold says more than they want to admit. Yeah, I'm sure that's right. And somebody commented on one of the videos. I talked about how eBay over the last few years has not disclosed their active seller count in a couple of years. And clearly it's because that number has dwindled. I think at its peak, it was probably in the 23 to 25 million range. My best research says it's down to about 18 million now, which is a substantial drop. And those sellers have just gone elsewhere. They've gone to Facebook Marketplace, they've gone to Mercari, they've gone to Etsy, Whatnot. And a lot of them have found success on those platforms. And now it's become almost a double-edged sword. eBay is trying to squeeze more and more through promoted listings fees and that sort of thing. They just did a big post yesterday about how you should advertise on eBay using promoted listings for the holidays. But they're trying to squeeze more and more gross merchandise volume and fee collection from a smaller and smaller pool of sellers because those people have gone elsewhere. And as you do that, you probably drive sellers to the other platforms where those fees are less, or in the case of Mercari, at least at the moment, non-existent, and it becomes kind of self-perpetuating. You lose more sellers, so you squeeze the existing ones a little harder, so you lose even more. They're still the 800-pound gorilla in the room, Amazon notwithstanding, but they need to be very careful about how much they try to squeeze out of their existing seller base. Big Dre says Q4 it's booming, but I'm maintaining my $9,000 90-day total. Yeah, things have been consistent. I've not seen like a big leap in sales. Like I talked about in the last main episode, my transaction count for eBay last week was actually well down, but my average ticket price was way up. I sold a lot of really higher value items, and I'm finding that to be true this week as I go through and like update my slides for my what sold recap. There have been weeks in the past where I only had 7, 8, 9 things to share. Last week I had 18. This week it's only Wednesday and I'm already up to 10 that were good enough that they'll be in the podcast next week. So the average ticket price has been really good on eBay, but the overall volume for me has not, the transactional volume has not been great. Den Decor Debo says, I think eBay is losing more to Etsy and Mercari than Whatnot. Yeah, could be. Particularly Mercari, though that will be interesting because clearly they're in a major state of flux over there with a shakeup at the executive level. Clearly a discussion about what they want to do with fees. it'll be interesting to see if they're able to maintain momentum acquiring sellers when a lot of sellers are saying they're not making any business over there, and then potentially the fees come back. Black Cat Flip says on eBay, seeing an increase, but Mercari is basically dead for me. There you go. A few sales here and there on Etsy and Posh. Etsy has been pretty consistent. Last week was really good. I think it was 9, which, you know, in the scheme of things doesn't sound like a lot. But again, the average ticket over there for me is really good. eBay last week was like 51 or 52. Normally it's closer to 80. Nobody, have you given up on Whatnot, or you'll be doing another auction sale show soon? I'm actually doing one tonight. Tonight at 7, I've got a antique and vintage book lot. I've actually got shows scheduled well into December. My plan is to run 2 shows a week minimum through the holidays and just see if I can sort out a profitable way to make that work. I'm selling a decent amount of stuff. I've sold over 100 items there, but the average ticket price has been like $2. So that's not great. But I'm going to continue to hammer away at it. I've got a couple of shows coming up where I'm going to try some different things. I just scheduled a show that will be all Western paperbacks. I have a show coming up in 2 weeks, I think, that is vintage children's books. So I'm going to try to experiment with some stuff. I don't know if you can see over my shoulder there. There are some piles of books that I've segregated out from the big book haul that I just did. So there'll be a show of like art books coming up, a show solely of vintage biographies. So I'm just going to try to experiment with some stuff for the next 7 or 8 weeks and see how it goes. If it continued to sell for me 20 to 30 items a week, even at an average of a couple of bucks a pop, I probably would keep doing it. It's fun. The shows are cool. They're fun to do. It doesn't look like at this point for me it's going to be a huge profit center, but it's outperforming Mercari at the moment. So no complaints there. Black Cat Flips, I've been trying to up my listing game too, so that has helped. Yeah, the more you can list, the better off you are. Last week, I think I did 180 some listings. This week, my goal is 155. As of yesterday, I was already at 78, so essentially halfway to my goal, just a couple of days in. So this is the time of year. Obviously, people are going to be looking over the next 6 weeks to buy. So if you've got stuff that you can list, this is the time to get it up there. Miss Lachey says, this month eBay has been a roller coaster. A few too many days of nothing, just fade to black. Yeah, I've been fortunate. I've not had any nothing days, but I did have a couple that were 3 or 4, where normally it's 12 to 15. So I feel you. Mel Flips It says the same. Paper Gold doing a Whatnot show on Monday where I have over $3,000 of product just in books going up. At one time, it was specifically eBay inventory. Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm at. I'm kind of going through right now like older eBay inventory stuff that I'm already running on clearance just to see if another audience maybe would be interested. And again, with this big recent purchase, I am kind of segregating out some stuff that I want to try over on Whatnot, since I have now a couple of thousand more books than I normally would have kind of in my inventory, just to see what works over there. You're having terrific success. I see other sellers who I watch for half an hour, 45 minutes, and they'll show 20 or 25 items and sell 1 or 2 for $1 or 2. So it's a real mixed bag of who manages to be successful over there and how they do it. As you said on our show, not being afraid to sell an item for $1 or 2 and just get a quick flip and get some cash flow is probably a good strategy over there. Den Decor, the biggest thing I'm facing is trying to claw back where I was in the spring. I'm spending twice as much time doing admin work, cross-listing, and customer service on 4 platforms now. That is one of the disadvantages to cross-listing. It does add a couple layers of making sure you get stuff delisted, unless you're using, the auto delist feature on programs like List Perfectly or Vendoo. But yeah, it does add an extra layer. And if it's not generating, a fairly significant amount of extra business, you do start to question whether it's worth it because of the ease with which I'm able to do it by using the list perfectly. For me, it's essentially been, as I've talked about before, about a 30% increase. My business, 30% of it is off of eBay, not including Whatnot. So it's worth it for me, that extra little bit of effort. But if it's only amounting to, a 5 or 10% increase, you would certainly question whether the juice is worth the squeeze, as they say. Big Dre says, last month I sold $12 on Mercari and $300 on Posh, but nothing yet this month on either platform. Posh obviously is going through some pains right now with what they did with their fees. Like I talked about, there was going to be some trust and reputational damage potentially that took place there because of making the change and then so quickly reverting back to the old formula. So that may take a while to fully recover. But Mercari, last week I didn't sell anything. This week I've sold one book for $9.90. So yeah, Mercari is not going great guns for any of us right now. Den Decor Depot says, even beyond 6 weeks, I do well into the second week of January. That's something I've talked about here pretty regularly. January, historically, for the last 5 years, has been my best month of the year. You get a lot of people who get gift cards, either for the sites or just generic Visa, MasterCard gift cards that want to shop. And for the stuff that I sell, vintage books, they can be very hard to gift give. You don't know, as the son, daughter, grandson, granddaughter, whatever, of someone, what would maybe be a great book for them to have. You don't maybe know what's in their collection. My mom is a big collector of Louis Bromfield books. He was a writer back in the 20s, 30s, 40s who lived in the area where we're from. So she's on a quest to collect all of his books. I wouldn't know which one to buy her because I don't know which ones she has. She's got 20 odd of his already. A gift card makes perfect sense. Then she could go and pick out her own. So January for me has always been super, super strong. KG's Unique, Rare, and Antique Books. You have one of the most high-tech shows on Whatnot. Thank you. I do want to try to attract with that, to do something different, maybe that people will share. Hey, you got to come see this with, I drop in graphics and I've got sound effects and 2 cameras set up so I can show myself and the book, and trying to, again, just do something a little extra to set that show apart. Again, it's not necessarily resulted in a lot of extra sales, but I've already got almost 100 followers. There are people who are coming to the shows and, they're saying in the chat, this is really cool to watch. The sound effects are awesome. So it is working from that standpoint. And, obviously the hope is over a longer time frame that will then turn into some business as well. No, buddy, in your opinion, how does the Whatnot algorithm work? I have no idea, to be fair. You see shows, like if you go on the page right now, you'll see shows that have 2, 3, or 4 viewers, and there will be other shows that have 4, 5, 600. A lot of it depends on what they're selling, how long they've been on the platform, and that sort of thing. I've not done like a product search on that site and gone in and looked for like a specific title of book or a particular author to see what results I get. You can correct me if I'm wrong, anybody who's a longtime Whatnot user. I'm not sure that is what they're trying to do. They're much more of the interactive, kind of the live experience, and people just bounce from show to show to show. When I'm in mine, I see people that come in, they go out, they come back, they go out. They're bouncing around from multiple shows, just seeing what's going on, as opposed to a more search engine based site like an eBay or an Etsy. So if there's a longtime seller on Whatnot that has any insights on the algorithm at Whatnot, leave them in the chat for us. Seems like a majority of Whatnot sellers are still struggling to find an audience and sell items. Yeah, as I was just saying, you see people all the time. They're on there for an hour and maybe sell an item or two. And it's difficult. If you've got some reasonably high value items, and you got 6 people in your show versus listing that on eBay where you might have thousands of people a day that get exposed to it, it becomes a very tough question. Do I want to, as I just said, do you want to risk selling the book for $1 because you've only got a half a dozen people in your show and maybe one of them is interested and you get out of it and you move on to the next thing? Or would you rather list it on eBay and maybe wait 6 months to sell it, but maximize the value? It's a really tough decision that sellers have to make. I don't know that there's necessarily a right answer. In my case, I'm not yet putting a lot of higher value items in my Whatnot shows for that very reason. My turnout is low enough that I know I'm not going to get anywhere near what the value of that thing is. And to sell a book that I might have $1 or $2 in for $1 or $2 is something I'm not willing to do just yet. As my audience grows and I'm getting 60, 80, 100 people in a show, then that math may change for me, but that's kind of where I'm at right now. Den Decor Depot says cross-listing is definitely saving my hide right now. Yeah, it is. And again, this is the time of year. If you're going to do it, this is when to do it. Algorithm on Whatnot doesn't equate, says paper gold, items that are desired and building an audience. Yeah, and that's kind of my philosophy too. And I don't know which comes first. Do you take the hit selling higher value desirable items at a loss to attract an audience, or do you build the audience first and then kind of weave in better higher value items? I don't know what the right answer is there. The approach I'm taking is to try to build the audience first and then look at moving in some better stuff. Sal's Mercado, hello. Long time no see. Thanks for stopping by. Media Picker, had to travel to Indiana this morning. How far is that for you from where you're at? Black Cat, that in and out thing is a glitch, I think. I usually let yours play and see that I leave and come back. There is a problem with that, I know, because like it even shows me while I'm doing the show. I'm there for an hour or an hour and 10 minutes, and it may show me coming and going 3 or 4 times. I don't know if it's losing connection. I don't know what that issue is. But I've had, because I've asked the question in the chat of a show, why do I see people that look like they're joining the show 2 or 3 times and they've told me, oh, I left to go look at so-and-so show and then I came back. So it's a little bit of both, but there is definitely a glitch there. Nobody, have you tried listing items on Whatnot Marketplace Shop? I listed 40 and one did sell overnight. I have not. My plan for Whatnot is to solely do it through the live thing, simply from the standpoint of to list individual items on Whatnot and leave them there. I can't do that through my cross-listing software, so it adds another layer of work, and I'm not sure that it's, for me, would be worthwhile to have items just sitting there on Whatnot like that. So I'm not using it that way, but I know there are people who do, and I'd be curious how people are doing with that. Miss Lachey says, understand your strategy on Whatnot. The dopamine of instant gratification can be blinding for a lot of people. Yeah, and that's what you hope for. I mean, when eBay first started, obviously most things, pretty much everything, was auctions, and that was kind of what you relied on, was people getting hyped up about wanting to win that thing. But there has to be obviously a critical mass of people to make that work. If you've got one that's interested in your vintage science fiction book and you're starting it at $1, there's a really good chance you're going to sell it for $1. If there are 2, maybe you'll get $3 or $4 out of it. If there are 22, then, depending on the desirability of the item, then maybe it gets bid up as people get caught up in the act of bidding. But for these smaller shows, I feel like, and again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that opportunity is very limited because you just don't have that critical mass of viewers to compete against each other and to get the juices flowing to get the items to bid up. Media Picker says it's just 30 minutes from the state line, so that's not too bad. my trips to pick up all these books was 50 minutes each way, and I made, I think all in it was 5 trips over 3 different days. So um, thank God for the mileage deduction. Yeah. That looks like the end of the current chat. So let's. I got this tub of books here. Let's see if we've got anything interesting. So you may have seen on my lock screen there. That is a picture of. It's. I was dating a woman and her twins. They all were living with me, and we went to Disney. And as we were leaving, they started shooting off the fireworks, and one of them turned around and saw that and just put his arms up. Most people are not lucky enough to capture like one of the most incredible moments of their life. And I was fortunate enough to get that shot of him, and it was, we're way off on a tangent, but so lucky, so blessed to be able to capture a moment like that. That will never leave. I've had 3 phones since then, and that is my lock screen on every phone. Anyway, before I get too emotional, let's get back in here and check out some of these books. We have The Art of Painting from the Philosophical Library by Da Vinci. Let's see if we've got anything here. Help if I could type. I'm just going to search by books for now. Not seeing anything. That is probably our one there with a torn dust jacket. So that's a pretty good reference point. 1957 first edition. It's 17 bucks with a torn dust jacket. This is 1957. So yeah, this is one we'll go ahead and list. I will probably do like $13.99 on this since it does not have a dust jacket, but it is in really nice shape. And I see there is a bunch of stuff that has popped up in the chat. So as soon as I finish this, we will get back over there and continue our discussion. Come on, camera, take the picture. Again, I am a stickler for putting in as many of these as I can. I'm pretty sure this is a first edition, but I'm not 100%, so I'm not going to call it that, but I am going to highlight that it is illustrated. I have noticed one change on the mobile app. It used to be until like a week ago, it always defaulted to auction. Now, suddenly without warning, it defaults to whatever method you used last, whether it's auction or buy it now, which is really helpful. But I've built up the habit of always clicking on the buy it now button because it always defaulted to auction for the last 5 years. So it's been a real problem for me to remember that I no longer have to hit that button, which seems like a stupid thing. But again, it's one of those changes that maybe it makes sense, but it seems unnecessary. You've got people who have been selling on the platform for 4, 5, 20, 25 years that have built up a habit of how they do things. And now you've just made this one little tweak, which maybe in their brains makes sense, but it has disrupted everybody's workflow temporarily as they adjust to the change. So that's just a random rant, but and one down. Let's hop back into the chat here. Paper Gold, thank you for another thought-provoking conversation. My pleasure. I appreciate it. If you want a link for tomorrow night, just let me know. Yep, I'm not actually sure what I've got going on tomorrow night, but I will definitely be in touch. Would definitely like to see that. Media Picker, once I get more organized, I'll probably do Whatnot with some small CD lots. That seems to be a thing that I see some sellers doing well, and Max, Paper Gold, also does that. He will do lots, 2, 3, 4 books, whatever looks like it makes sense. Again, there's no guarantee that those will sell. I was watching a lady the other night who had some really nice lots of kind of like architecture and art books, 2 or 3 to a lot in really nice condition, and it was crickets. Nobody was buying anything with dollar starts. So that's what gets your attention. You know, it's depending on how you set them up. Like I'm setting all mine up, actually taking a photo and putting in title, author, description, filling out their version of item specifics. So putting 20 books into a show takes me 20, 30 minutes to get a show prepared. Now, some sellers are just doing, I've got 20 books that weigh 1 pound and I got 20 books that weigh 2 pounds and whatever, and they're just holding them up, moving on to the next. That takes a lot less time because you're not taking all the photos in advance. But either which way, setting up a show does take some time. And then obviously you've got whatever, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. I see some people that go for pretty long times on these shows. And your sell-through rate, like Max said when he was with us, that his sell-through rate is basically 100%. I see a lot of folks whose sell-through rate is 20, 25%. I've had some shows where it's been 50%. I've had one show, I think I talked about it a couple of weeks ago. I didn't sell anything for the duration of the show and was just about to wrap up. And I had a couple of people pop in late and asked if I would rerun some items. And then I ended up selling everything. Now, granted, I sold them all for $1. So it wasn't great, but I did ultimately sell them. So it is definitely a different platform to learn and master, and the way things sell is definitely different. It's I don't know that it's for everybody because there's a certain amount of, you know, if you list something on eBay and it doesn't sell, at that point you're out. If you're paying listing fees, you're out a listing fee and you're out whatever you paid for the item. But you still have the potential to make your full profit on it. If you sell it on Whatnot and you sell it for $1 and it was a $25 or a $35 book, that's profit potential that you've lost. And I'm not sure everybody has the mental makeup to be okay with that. You can let me know in the chat where you're at with that. Cozy Corner Treasures, thank you. I appreciate that. Like I said, it's one of those things. I feel like it's pretty rare to like both experience a moment like that and to be able to capture it and be able to hang on to it. I think they were 4 at the time. They're in 11 now. Things are a little different at 11 than it was when they were 4 and 5, but they're great kids. Miss Lachey says, Media Picker lucked up on a large tote of CDs for $14.99 over the weekend. Should be able to sell some decent lots out of it. decent rock stuff. Those of you who have been playing along here for some time know that I did a purchase. I think it's, man, it might be 4 years ago now. It's definitely at least 3 years ago, where I bought like 8,300 CDs. So I had stopped in a local record store and they do vinyl, but they take trades. And I left my card and I said, if you ever get somebody that comes in and wants to like trade in CDs, since I know you don't do CDs, let me know. I would be interested in maybe meeting up with that person and making an offer to buy them. And I didn't get a chance to talk to the owner, and I left my card and I didn't hear anything for like 6 months. And then randomly I get a phone call from this guy and he's like, hey, I just found your card. I'm the owner of such and such record store. He says, I've done a couple of deals over the years where I have purchased record stores that are going out of business. But part of the deal was, kind of like I do with my bulk buys, I had to take everything, and I've got some CDs I would like to get rid of if you're interested. So I said, yeah, I'd love to come down and see what you got. How many do you think it is? And he said, I think it might be about 2,000. So I roll into his little warehouse space and I can tell right away it's way more than 2,000. And I asked him again, I'm like, how many do you think are here? And he says, I think it's probably around 2,000. And I'm like, okay, if that's what you think, what do you want for him? And he says, if you'll haul him out of here, I'll sell him to you for $300. And I was like, cha-ching. So I got him home and I started counting them out and going through them all to get my inventory square. And it ended up being about 8,300 CDs. And some of them ended up in lots of 30 wholesale lots that I sold for 12 or 13 bucks. I was into them for 4 cents a piece. It was fine, whatever. Some of them sold for hundreds of dollars. The first CD I sold from that lot was a very rare one of two promo CDs for a Depeche Mode tour from like the 1990s that sold for 300 and some dollars, almost paid for the whole lot after fees with just one sale. So yeah, picking up those bulk purchases, you can find some real gems, and then obviously you can build lots and make your money back really, really quick. I haven't done a CD buy in a long time because I got a garage full of books. But if I came across another deal like that, I would absolutely do it. Den Decor Depot just sold a belt buckle on Depop. More sales there than on eBay so far today. I think I've only had one thing sell all day today so far. I had an auction for an old catalog of lamps. Very strange, but the lamps themselves, when I looked it up, nobody had this catalog, and the lamps all sell for $150 to $250, $300. So I thought, I got this catalog. I'll just throw it up here at an auction for 20 bucks and see what happens. And lo and behold, somebody bought it. It was part of this, again, this 1,800 book purchase. So it's a 50-cent item to me, and it sold for 20 bucks. We'll take it. Big Dre says, I paid $260 for $2,000 of inventory on Veterans Day, 50% off sale. Number one find was an Iowa CD tape player valued at $600 that I paid $10 for. Nice. I remember when Iowa was the thing. I used to sell electronics way back in a former life, and Iowa was highly sought after stuff. That's a good find. Congratulations. Nobody said, I done some Whatnot auction sales, wasted hours and didn't sell much. Whatnot Marketplace shop, I think, is a different animal. Hard to explain. Keep me posted on that and how you're doing with it. We do these lives, unless I'm traveling to do a book buy like I was last week. We do these lives pretty much every Wednesday at 11 a.m. I'd appreciate if you could come back over the weeks and keep us posted on how you're doing selling on the Whatnot Marketplace, because I've not really run into anybody else that's trying to do that. Everybody I've talked to that's a Whatnot seller is doing the live shows, the live selling, the auctions, that sort of thing. So I would definitely be curious about how that goes for you. That is, again, the last of the current chat. So let's pop back in here and maybe do another listing. Since I've got thousands of them, I need to keep moving here. That's a paperback version of it. Here we go. That looks like our book. Yes, yes. Mine's in maybe slightly better shape than that. They're selling for $24 plus shipping. I think they're probably high on their shipping. He's at $7.38. I'm guessing this is max 3 pounds, probably 2. It's 2, so there's an extra $2 there. So I could price mine at $24.99 plus medium mail shipping and still be cheaper than the other one that's on there, and mine is in better shape. That sounds like a win. You will note that I did not look to see if there are any sales on this particular item. I've got these. I'm into them for 50 cents a piece. I don't mind long tail. I sell stuff every day that's been in my shop for 2, 3, 4 years. So even if this is not and media, a lot of these are not high sell-through rate items, but a potential $25 item, I'll probably put an acceptable offer of $20 on this that I own for 50 cents. Plus paying the fees is a transaction I'd be willing to do, and I'm willing to wait for it. So, oops. Had there been a whole bunch of these of this exact book, I probably would have pulled up solds to see. Are there people that are trying to sell for too little? Are there people that are trying to sell for too much? Kind of where is that average middle ground? Again, kind of look at the condition of mine relative to the others and then make a decision. In this case, there's, as I scroll down through, that was the first comp of essentially the exact same book in a fairly similar condition with its dust jacket. So I'm just using that as its reference. We'll go from there. Faithful reproduction of the whole original work as published in 1894. This is old. This one to capture if there are illustrations, some of them. And the flaps of the dust jacket as well. Oops. Always remember to check my spelling. This is about religious symbols, so I'm going to use religious. They highlighted dust jacket, but they did not indicate that it's illustrated. So again, like I talk about all the time, the more item specifics you have, the more accurate you are. In theory, at least, the higher you should appear in the search rankings. So having extra stuff definitely is to your advantage. And another one bites the dust. Let's go back over here into the chat. Nobody done some one auction sales, wasted hours. Yep. Yeah, rock CDs will definitely sell. I definitely would be in the market at this point for a collection of old metal, old punk, that sort of stuff. More vintage, like I say vintage, but early 2000s and back. It was interesting. I did watch a YouTube video earlier today from a guy who owns a record store, and he was talking about vinyl. If you've looked at it at all, new vinyl can be crazy expensive, and he was discussing how they've not held their value particularly well. So he's got customers that have purchased, say, the new Adele LP when it first came out, and it was a $34, $35 record. Now, because so many of them were made, they're selling for $18, $20 brand new because dealers are trying to get rid of them, and people are coming in to try to trade those albums in. They're essentially worth $3 or $4 now in trade, because as a used one, he can't sell it for anywhere near 20 bucks. He's got to sell it for 10 or 11. So you've got people who bought records at 30 that when they trade them in, they're getting $3 or $4 worth. He's concerned, and maybe rightly so, about how long lasting that kind of economic model can continue, especially given inflationary pressures and all the rest of it. So I thought that was really interesting. And it does give us as resellers opportunities, because we're buying typically at garage sales, estate sales, where we can buy sometimes big quantities of things for pennies on the dollar. That even puts us at an advantage over the record store, who's trying to give reasonably fair market value because he's trying to build a customer, a clientele. So he doesn't want to like totally screw over the kids that are coming in to try to trade these things in, where we, on the other hand, are trying to build relationships with estate sellers. Like the seller that I just bought this stuff from this past week was thrilled that they were not going to have to deal with these 1,800 books. Now, ultimately, obviously, there was another room full of books that I wasn't even aware of that they were going to have to deal with, because I didn't take those. But there was an entire library room of books that they got $900 essentially for, that they may not have gotten anything for previously, and they didn't have to go through the time, expense, and labor of figuring out what to do with them and discarding them. So we're in a very different headspace than a guy who's owning a physical record store. Then Decor Depot, Vendu has support for listing to whatnot. Okay, I did not know that. There you go. Have a few hundred items up on there, but no purchases in about 6 weeks. Okay, interesting. I'll be very curious how much stuff sells over there in the marketplace, because that just doesn't feel like, and maybe that's just me, their reason for being. You know, when you first get on the app, it's just showing you live shows. That's clearly what they're trying to accomplish, and I feel like maybe this marketplace piece is a secondary, kind of an afterthought. Be real interesting to see how that goes over time. Sissy Moore says, does it help your Whatnot show if people are there to support you but not buy? Can your viewers here today add their Whatnot name so we can check them out? Absolutely. If you're on Whatnot and you want to leave your username in the chat for other people to go follow, absolutely do that. Mine is, of course, at Galaxy CDs Rocks, just like everything else. So feel free to follow me. I feel like it does because, again, you know, it pops up, you sign into Whatnot, and you're presented on your phone with a bunch of shows. And which show are you more likely to go to? One that has 2 or 3 viewers, or one that currently has 20, 30, 100? The natural human reaction is, this show must be more interesting because it has a lot more people in it. So even if the folks there are just there to observe or to just watch the production value of the show or whatever it is, their mere presence, I think, gives that show a leg up on the other shows that don't have that many viewers. So that's just my take on it. It's just human nature. You see where there's a bunch of people over here looking at something, it must be interesting. I better go check it out. Fear of missing out kind of thing. Why is, I assume you mean Vendu, so expensive? I don't use that. I use List Perfectly. I'm paying about $49 a month for mine. I think they have tiers that are even higher that will allow you to do more things. So it depends on what you're trying to do. Again, in my case, you know, is $49 cheap? No, I mean, that's a pretty significant expense to pay every month, but I'm doing $1,500 a month in sales on these other platforms, maybe give or take. So it's absolutely more than paying for itself every month. So you have to kind of balance out the expense versus the reward. In my case, it took a day when I first signed up for List Perfectly to sell something that justified paying for the software. And it's done that month after month after month. I don't know the price of Vendoo, but I assume it is the same kind of thing. Assuming that allows you to generate enough extra business, it's absolutely worth the cost to do. And like I said earlier, cross listing in general, if you're not getting enough sales to justify the level of work, then you're selling either items that are not popular enough to justify, or you're not putting them on the right platforms, or whatever the situation is that those things are not selling. But in my case, it's been super, super successful and very profitable, even with Mercari kind of being in the dumps right now. Hollywood Reseller. Have you been in some of my Whatnot shows? Hollywood, that name looks familiar. Den Decor Depot, paid the $5.99 up front. It's about $50 a month. It's allowed me to cross list to multiple platforms quickly. Sales have easily paid for the subscription in 2 months. Yep. It is, like I said, I'm on the monthly plan. It's $49 a month. They also have an affiliate plan. So if you're interested in using List Perfectly, in the show notes and the description, there's a link to my affiliate link. You can make a little bit of money back that way. Essentially, for me, the full disclosure, I have enough people that have signed up through my affiliate link to use List Perfectly that I'm actually most months break even, or maybe $8 or $10 ahead using List Perfectly because of the affiliate piece of it. So that is another avenue. I assume Vendoo has something similar to that. So think about that as a way to defray some of the cost. If the cost is a concern to you, think about, can you use an affiliate program to help, obviously to help them, but to also help you defray some of that upfront cost. At Den Decor Depot, another Whatnot. My lurking is helpful, yes. I appreciate it very much. Big Dre says I pay $30 a month for Vendoo, and that seems like, again, a reasonable amount. Depending on what you're cross-listing, that's a sale, 2 sales in a month, recoups that expense, and then from there, it's just profit. It's sales you may not have made otherwise. Or if you had done that manually, it's the labor savings that allows you now to list more items. So if it takes you 5 minutes to do a listing on eBay, and then 5 minutes to do that listing also on Mercari, and then 5 more minutes to do it on Etsy or wherever, one listing ends up taking you a significant amount of time. If you can do it through this software, and you do the first one in 5 minutes and you do the next 2 in a minute apiece, now you've got all this extra time to do additional listings. So where you were doing 1 on 3 platforms, now you're doing 3 or 4 across those platforms. And again, it's economies of scale. The more stuff you can get out there in front of more eyeballs, the more likely you are ultimately to sell something, I think. Just using my other phone. Yep. We are closing in on an hour. So if you have anything else you'd like to discuss while we're here, I don't know if you're still here, Mel, but you commented on a video. There was a discussion, I think it was in the last podcast, about, I think it was P. Diddy T-Tube was talking about cutting art out of art books and selling them kind of as budget prints or collection of prints. And I mentioned that I know of sellers that cut illustrations out of books, and you asked to hear a little bit more about that. So that is, like, I know people, I see people that they buy like bulk lots of old magazines, and they just go through and they cut out all these old vintage ads for whatever, cigarettes and liquor and whatever, old department stores and whatnot, and they sell those just as individual ads, as kind of paper ephemera. Um, I talk about a lot. There's literally money everywhere. It just depends on how you want to get it. I personally would not spend the time to go through an antique book or an art book to cut out illustrations or art to try to sell them separately. But as he said, his wife is doing that. She enjoys like going through the books and finding the good art, and they're selling them sometimes in sets for sounded like hundreds of dollars. There are people who maybe they want a print of a particular piece of art, but the actual print is super expensive. But you could buy the one out of a book, which is not the same maybe quality of an actual print, but it might be pennies on the dollar, or you could buy a collection of them for way, way less money than you would pay if you wanted to buy 10, 20, 30, 50 prints. It's a great opportunity for someone who wants to do that sort of labor and then list and sell those sorts of items. So you see people all the time that they'll sell the art out of a vintage book, or they will do collections of books solely by color. Here's 10 red cloth hardcover books for $1 a piece. If you do like a bulk buyout and you got a bunch of books that have essentially no value, or maybe the insides are in terrible condition, or they're missing pages or whatever, and you can't sell them as a book, they'll create lots. Here's 10 red books, $10 plus shipping, for people who are just looking for home decor. There are so many different ways to take these same items and make money selling it as a book, selling the art out of it, selling it as home decor, whatever the case may be. So don't necessarily think you should limit yourself to selling a thing maybe as the thing that it is. There may be opportunity in there. I've done that with old magazines where they're in pretty ratty shape, but there'll be a particular ad or a particular article that maybe is of some value, and I'll remove that and sell that separately. So there's always opportunity out there. How old? Because that sounds relaxing. Yeah, with those art books, I assume they're not necessarily all that old. Like in this collection I just picked up, there are art books that go back into the 70s. And assuming that the pages have not yellowed so that you could sell that in a condition that someone could theoretically mat and frame, that would be a win. Now, I probably won't do that with mine. I'll try to sell them, again, depending on their value. Maybe they'll get listed on eBay and Etsy. Maybe they'll end up in a whatnot show. I'm going to try to sell them as a book. But again, particularly if you get books that have wear damage, maybe are already missing pages, that may be an opportunity to get some value out of them that you ordinarily couldn't. Can you talk more about the change on eBay, the monthly payment? I assume you're talking about the thing going on, the test, I guess, we'll see, in Germany, where they're allowing buyers to accumulate all of their purchases, and then at the end of the month, they get one invoice from eBay for that amount. There was not a lot of detail in the article that I had reference to. I'm not on eBay Germany, so I couldn't go and see the actual information on it. The question that was posed in that article, and the question that I would have, is what happens to you as a seller? Is eBay paying you out of their own pocket for the sale of that item? So you sell an item today, whatever, $20, and eBay deposits the $20 in your payment account just like they would normally, and then eBay is responsible for collecting that $20 later from the customer. I don't know how that works. As a seller, I would not be interested in waiting until the end of the month to see if that buyer pays their invoice. What if they purchased $2,000 worth of stuff and they can't pay their invoice? I think the thing, it sounds good on paper, but I feel like it's fraught with peril. That it could be really, really messy if you end up with people that, because they don't have to pay right away, accumulate a big purchase that they're unable to pay for. Who eats that? Does eBay eat that? And how often can they eat those before it becomes a problem? when and how do the sellers get paid? If that thing does not get paid, does the seller get charged back? Do they send out a repo man to try to collect all that? I don't know. Again, I could not access a lot of details on it, and the article that I referenced was fairly limited in what it showed. Uh, Again, on paper, sounds like a really interesting concept, but it sounds like it sounded like it was interest free. Like there was no extra charge to participate in this program. And again, if the customer doesn't pay or doesn't pay in a timely fashion, how is eBay affording to float, assuming they're paying the seller at the time of sale? How do they float that for 20, 30, 40, 45 days or more and not collect interest on it? And if they do they have to now register as a bank because they're, you know what I mean? It's really, there's a lot of moving parts there, and I'm not completely convinced that that's a program you'd ever see here in the US. Again, Germany tends to be the market where they try different kinds of experiments. It was the first one where they did fee-free selling for private sellers in the clothing category and so on. So they do a lot of experiments over there. That's one that'll be very interesting to watch. Vintage ads are good money, says Den Decor Tipo, but long tail. Yep. They would be, I guess in theory, fairly easy to store. Obviously, there's nothing to them. It's a one sheet. If you had like comic book covers or Ziploc bags or something that you could store them in and label them efficiently in an inventory system where they're going to be relatively easy to find. Again, if you don't mind long tail item, obviously as a media seller, I have thousands of long tail items, so it wouldn't be an issue for me. They can be good money, but they may take a while. Fern Flips, I've sold several lots of old books that are in terrible condition as home decor. Yep, I actually had somebody on my Whatnot sale a couple of weeks ago ask specifically for books that had like gold leaf on the spines for home decor. They just $1 a piece kind of stuff. They just want like the Reader's Digest books that are really attractive on a shelf. They look like they're really nice, fancy books. There's really nothing to them. They're fairly inexpensive, but a lot of people like to have that sort of stuff, and they'll pay to have them as decor. Fern Flip said, I've also heard people cutting out pictures, illustrations from old books, creating lots for junk journals. Yep. Katie Reeds cuts up a lot of old books that are not in sellable condition, takes out the artwork or particular quotes or passages and converts those into like bookmarks and stuff, which is really cool. She sells those on Etsy. Go seek her out. She's got some really awesome stuff over there. So again, multiple ways to earn income off of stuff that you might otherwise consider to be just junk. There's a ton for 10-cent, 25-cent art books at my library bookstore, so I might try. Yeah, and again, if that's something that you feel like you mentioned, you thought it would be relaxing to just kind of sit and go through a book and cut out some prints and whatnot, you could spend an evening and maybe come up with 20 or 25 from a particular artist or a particular art style, and maybe you sell them individually, maybe you sell them in a lot. I mean, there's just so many options. And again, if you can get them for that cheap, you know, in a lot of cases, those books aren't worth anything. I mean, they're selling them for 10 cents a quarter. They're probably, some of them are going to be $5, $6, $8 books, free shipping on eBay, which you can't make work because a lot of times those art books are, you know, 6, 8 pounds. So they're not really sellable as a book. But if you could cut out the art and make $50, $80, $100 selling the individual like prints of the art, yeah, that's a win. Absolutely. Let's see what we've got here. Yeah, no, I'm not a net 30 business. Right. No, I'm not interested in that plan. That's why I don't mind paying fees. I don't mind paying credit card fees. I want that financial risk on someone else. I want to get paid. It's all about cash flow. Nobody says eBay should maybe do a pilot, but only to eBay buyers who pay a yearly membership fee to make sure the right buyers have access to such a program in Germany. Right, you might want to limit who can participate through, and again, they have gone through some links to, what is it, they're calling them trusted buyers, which are now being allowed to not pay immediately for some items. So they have already an algorithm that allows them to identify what they consider to be trusted buyers. So they could theoretically use something like that as well. I think the key still is for us as sellers, when do we get paid? It's all about us. Lord Jake Ryan, hello. If eBay was to pay the buyer and not yet get the money for it, eBay would have less cash on hand, and I think that would not look good for shareholders. Right. That's why I said I don't know how you float. I don't know how many customers there are in Germany. I don't know how big this program could be, but it's clearly got the potential to be tens of thousands or maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars a month in what essentially is going to be, liabilities on their books. They've got it, future income. So it's from an accounting standpoint, it's a little bit weird, but you have cash that you should have on your ledger earning interest that you've collected the fees on and all the rest of that, that now is not there. If it results in, as the eBay CEO has pushed and pushed and pushed, if it results in an increase in gross merchandise volume, which is something they're trying to achieve, then maybe you can make the argument that it's a win. But just purely on the face of it, it looks super risky to me. Den Decor Tipo says, have a great day. It's time to list. Yes, we are at a little over an hour, so I'll give it one more go round. If you have anything you would like to add today, speak now or forever hold your peace in the chat. Like I said, I've got not quite 1,800 books because I've already listed a couple hundred of them. But I got a pretty good stash of stuff I still need to get through. Somebody, and I'll have to look. I don't recall the name. Somebody reached out to me on Instagram and gave me the name of an estate seller that they had been at the sale. And I don't know if they overheard the person talking about looking for somebody to buy books or what the story was, but they sent me this person's information and said, this seller, local to me, is looking for someone who can consistently buy book collections because they're having a hard time with books. So I reached out and we got into a conversation, and she asked, could she share my information with 4 of her fellow estate sellers who are part of the same company that are franchisees throughout the greater Cincinnati and Dayton area. And I said, absolutely, feel free, share my information. I'd be happy to, work with anybody. And a couple of days later, this person from Dayton, who was part of this kind of secondary group, reached out and said, hey, we've got a sale. We've got a bunch of books. Would you like to come check it out? And lo and behold, I've got a massive, massive collection of books that appear to be really, really decent value. There's no $400 or $500 books in this collection, I don't think, but there's a lot of $20, $30, $40 stuff. I'm into them for 50 cents a piece. I'll take those deals all day. So again, I talk about, the importance of networking, letting people know what you do for a living. A lot of people are hesitant to do that. I tell everybody. I hand out cards. I'm like, this is what I do for a living. I sell books. If you got books you want to get rid of, let me know. I'm happy to make you an offer. I almost never say no to buying more books because again, there's always going to be times, we're heading into Thanksgiving. There's going to be a weekend with no estate sales. If I do 200 listings that week and can't go source because there's no sales because of the holiday, I don't have to worry about running out of stuff. So let people know what you do. You'd be surprised how often like friends and family will just say, hey, I got all this stuff you can just have, and they'll just give you stuff. Please keep us updated on the German eBay change. I will. As we find more information and see how that goes, I will absolutely continue to update that in the normal kind of weekly podcast episode. With that, my friends, I appreciate, as always, the fact that you spent part of your Wednesday here listening to me ramble. It's always a pleasure to chat with you guys. Until next time, it's time to sell.